What is it that she can realistically hope to achieve from this mad dash across Europe today?
Sure. Well, most of the criticism of her proposed deal centres on the so-called backstop, the insurance policy against a hard border in Ireland. And I think what she can credibly do here is both provide a mixture of domestic assurances that, for example, the Northern Irish institutions will have a greater role in overseeing how that backstop works, but also assurances from the EU that that backstop arrangement would only be temporary, it wouldn't be a permanent arrangement, and also that the EU couldn't impose a sort of customs border down the Irish Sea without the UK being a party to that agreement.
But listening to some of the rhetoric particularly from our own backbench members of Parliament yesterday during that restive day in the Commons, for many of them, removing the backstop altogether is the very minimum of their requirements, and it seems that there's absolutely no chance of that happening.
Yeah, I'd agree. It seems very unlikely that that's something that Brussels would countenance at this stage. Clearly, this has been a hard-fought agreement and a hard-fought negotiation to get to this point. So I think it's very clear that the Irish government in particular, but also other EU governments, would be loath to reopen the agreement to that extent. I think what we can be expected to see is sort of legal reassurances, an exchange of letters or side letters to interpret the agreement rather than reopening the agreement fundamentally.
Now, assuming that isn't enough to get this deal through the House of Commons in early January or whenever it is that it's put before the British Parliament, as it must be, you, I think, suggest that it will probably be defeated. And what do you think then are the likely options? How do you think then this Brexit process will play out?
Well, I think it's still unclear exactly what would happen in a vote and when that vote will be. I think it's going to be in the first 2 weeks of January, but that still remains unclear. I think Mrs May's strategy is effectively to play for time and hope that something turns up. Hope that all the people who are opposed to this deal, they come from all spectrums of the debate, those who want to see a softer Brexit, those who want to see a second referendum, those who want to see a harder Brexit or no deal together, that they all run out of steam and find out actually the second best option, i.e. Mrs May's deal, is the only option on the table. I think that's her hope.
And how likely is that?
I still think it's possible that we end up with something close to Mrs May's deal at the end. Whether she is still Prime Minister at that stage or the route to that, I think, is very unclear. But ultimately, we're in uncharted territory and anything can happen.
And in terms of satisfying the Brexit referendum, which seems to be one of her main priorities, she's repeated it often enough, to what extent does her deal actually tick those boxes?
Well, I think firstly there clearly are lots of issues with her deal. The backstop is clearly problematic from a unionist perspective and from a perspective of those in Northern Ireland. But I think it also has merits. Presuming we do enter the backstop, it would provide us with a lot of Brexit. We would remain tied to the EU for certain things, such as goods, but it would end the free movement of people. The whole of the UK services economy, which is 80% of our economy, would be out of the EU's regulatory orbit. So actually it would provide a major sort of removal of EU law and EU regulation from the UK in one fell swoop. But it doesn't mean it hasn't got problems.
Understood. Thank you very much, Stephen.